I'd like to call the regular meeting of the Rutland City Board of School Commissioners to order. Would you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Would the Secretary please note that all commissioners are present with the exception of Commissioners Morrow, McCullough, and Sanborn, and I know that Mr. Sanborn will be here soon. The first order of business is the acceptance of the minutes of the last regular meeting of the Board dated June 13th, 1995. A motion, please.
So moved.
Second.
Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes of June 13th? If not, all in favor of the minutes as presented, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Thank you. I am not aware of any written correspondence to the Board at this time. Are there any citizens in the audience who wish to address the Board regarding any issues at all?
Since we talked about the minutes, I'd just like to compliment the person who keeps our minutes. I find them very helpful, easy to work with, and an excellent job. So I want to say thank you.
And I have had the pleasure of conveying those same thoughts.
Thank you. Here you go.
The superintendent requested that one of the items under financial matters regarding item 4, the insurance renewal, we are anticipating the arrival of the insurance consultant who's coming from out of town, and I'd like permission from the Board when he does arrive to subvert the agenda and move right into that topic when he does arrive, if that's all right with the Board.
No.
Why am I not surprised, man?
At this time, the Chair would entertain a motion to approve the licensed and non-licensed section of the Personnel Memorandum, number 112, dated June 23rd, 1995, and that it be approved as recommended by the Superintendent of Schools.
So moved. Second.
I'd ask the Superintendent to address the Personnel Memorandum, please.
Thank you, Dr. Dick. The recommendations I will make tonight are first for the licensed teacher appointments. Kathleen Amen as a support teacher at the Rutland High School. Delia Bort as a teacher of the deaf at Rutland High School. Robin Smith-Ogg, a speech and language pathologist at the Rutland Intermediate School. Doris Fahrenkopf is a speech and language pathologist at the middle school. And John Adams, grade 6 elementary teacher at the intermediate school. For the summer school professional appointments that are working with John Stempeck this summer. First, of course, is John Stempeck as the coordinator, and Cornelius Crocker, Shane McGinnis, Kathy Barrett, Karen Nagel, Mary Justin, Amanda Pagano, Mary Beth Carbine, Lynn Trincy, Rebecca Wood, Joan Poco, Deborah Tobin, Mary Kay Olson, all of whom have been employed or are employed by us in one or other categories for the summer school program. There's a non-licensed salary adjustment list which I've included with those people not represented by bargaining units. And I will turn to that. They include the Director of Maintenance, Hayden Bride, at the stated recommended salary adjustment. Robert Fingan, Business Manager. Francis Clark as Working Supervisor. Will Lanphier as Working Supervisor. Bruce Williams as a Working Supervisor. Ronald Dean as a Working Supervisor. Mary Johnson, known usually as Yogi, the Truant Officer. John Martell, Adult Services Coordinator. Regina Colhett, Vocational Guidance Coordinator. Personnel, clerical, secretarial personnel not aligned. That is, again, not part of any bargaining unit. Sherry Bizzaro, Stacia Cavalieri, Joanne Eels, Dennis McCaffrey, Ella Messer, Linda Nygaard, Kathy Parker, Randy Roberts, and Wanda Stockman. These people are all being recommended at 3% with 2 exceptions where there's a salary with a couple of exceptions. One where Yogi's salary is fixed to a percentage of the teacher schedule, and other 2 personnel who are not at the top of that schedule we had put into place, and they've been moving up the appropriate step. The others will all be 3% as listed. Fall and winter coaching reappointments is also an enclosed list for you. Shall I read through those, Dr. Dick? It's a little lengthy.
Please do.
Okay. Fall coaching nominations, and these are all renominations for people who have been in their positions. Mike Norman as head football coach, Nick Caligiuri, football assistant, Ron Tapatasso, football assistant, Mike Daly, freshman assistant coach, Martin Mayer, JV football, Jeff Casarino, JV football, Kevin Keefe, freshman football, Kevin Balomo, freshman football, Edward McClellan, cross country, Lincoln Fenn, cross country, Rick Ouellette, boys soccer, Steve Anderson, JV boys soccer, Todd Maxfield, freshman boys soccer, Jim Lehman, junior high boys soccer, Michael Kinsler, girls soccer, Rich Alberti, JV girls soccer, Christine Martin, freshman girls soccer, Michelle Winham, junior high girls soccer, Lynn Sanders as field hockey head coach. The next slot is open. We are presently advertising for the freshman field hockey, so there's no appointment recommended there. Eleni Sear, field hockey, Erika Nuas, field hockey, and Amanda Pagano, football cheerleading. For the winter coaching nominations, all renominations for people who held these positions. We already had made the head basketball coach, so that's not being appointed tonight. The board's already taken that action. Steve Sampson, JV boys basketball. Jeff White, boys freshman. Jeff Casarino, boys 7th grade basketball. And Dick Wright, Kevin Keefe, boys 8th grade basketball. And Dick Wright, head girls basketball. Dan Favreau, freshman girls basketball. Christine Martin, JV girls basketball. Lou D'Angelo, 8th grade girls basketball. Michelle Winham, 7th grade girls basketball. Greg McClellan, head alpine ski coach. Mike Gallagher, head Nordic ski. Carol Noble, basketball cheerleading. Glenn Olson, ice hockey. Dirk Stupert, ice hockey. And Mike Norman in the weight room. And those conclude the winter coaching nominations for next year. And finally, a maternity leave for Margaret Clifford, for information only, Secretary of Maintenance, and 2 summer school paraeducators to help John Stumpback in that program, Kathy Petrubi and Jean Hazeltine. And that completes the recommendations for personnel for tonight.
Suggestions or questions regarding the personnel memorandum, please? Cheryl.
Are all of the teacher appointments existing positions, or are any of them new positions?
2 of them are new positions, Cheryl. Dee Bort, teacher of the deaf, and Doris Fahrenkopf, speech and language pathologist. I can give you an explanation, a brief explanation of the funding for each of those positions. Dee Bortz is coming here to work with a tuition student coming from Chittenden County who is deaf and needs the help of a professional teacher of the deaf.
The town of Chittenden or Chittenden County?
The town of Chittenden, as a sending student on a regular tuition basis. And then they will also be paying quite a bit of the additional cost of this position and some of the supplementary services for this child through the normal special education funding formulas which they handle up there through their supervisory union. Indeed, pass the money through to us. The second half of that package to help fund for Dee Bortz is a deaf child who's going to be coming to us on a tuition basis from Rutland South, Henry Burnham's district, a child whom they have had placed in the Austin school for the past couple of years. And it will be more cost effective for them to send the child here to us and help share the cost of this teacher of the deaf and all the other associated costs with this very specialized program for these 2 youngsters. I've spoken to both superintendents and they're both fully aware of the situation and in agreement and providing all the cost and support necessary to make the program work.
Will there be any net cost to our district?
There will be a very small amount of net cost to our district, somewhere in the vicinity of $4,000 to $5,000, which will be handled by our special education funding mechanism to help pay for several other children that we have who are completely deaf but have hearing problems. And we'll just borrow from some of that talent to help those children to meet their IEPs at the same time.
And where will the money come from in our budget in order to fund that $4,000 or $5,000?
90% of it will be coming through this special education formula for these youngsters, because they will, as some of these youngsters do, increase that threshold and get them into that 90% level pretty quickly because of their intense needs.
Okay,
So
but
10% of it would be coming from our regular budget that has been built into the budget to provide for those local needs.
okay, is it coming from the personnel account or is it coming from contingency?
This would be coming from the personnel accounts in special education, not contingency.
Was this budgeted for
Yes.
originally? Okay.
Now, let me speak about another one that's on that list, because I'll go into a little more detail in a few minutes. Doris Varenkov is going to be filling a speech and language pathologist position for us that we have been desperately short of for quite a few years. And we're going to be looking at the funding to pay for that position through the Medicaid reimbursement formula, in which we already have money in the bank right now, sitting there to use for next year. I will explain that in more detail to you in a few minutes.
Madeline?
I've got a few questions on summer school. Where does that money come from?
Bob?
Chapter 1.
That's all chapter 1?
Hands in special ed funding.
95, 96 special ed funding?
It would be 95, 96.
How much of it is 95, 96?
Approximately $5,000. It comes out of one of our federal grants, which is IDEA.
Then, let's see. I have, on the fall coaching positions, I have two questions. First of all, are there any changes in this list that you've given to us that maybe might have occurred since the time we got this, or this is it? All these people we're expecting them all to come back to work?
We're expecting them all to come back. They're all renominations. People been employed.
Is there a reason yet? I mean,
Well, I thought I had heard that somebody got a job somewhere, but I can't remember the name, a phys ed position someplace, and maybe wouldn't be coaching.
David, do you know something about a position here?
Yeah, the person involved just found out that he was awarded another position as a football coach, and until we receive something in writing, until he notifies his current employer, I thought we had to wait and not do anything about it until we hear something in writing.
Okay. Then the other question that I'll ask, did the winter coaches give evaluations to their basketball players? Well, that was a concern that I've had over and over again, and in one coach in particular, I don't feel comfortable voting on that. I've asked for this now for 3 years in a row, unless I know that kids are getting some feedback. We have here we have $18,000 in football coaches, $15,000 in soccer coaches, $18,000 in basketball coaches, and I know that we don't hire them just to coach winning teams. I want to know that kids are getting a learning experience, and if they are not evaluating them as allegedly we've asked them, then I don't feel comfortable voting for them.
I would have to ask Glenn to find out. I don't know that it's in there.
Dave, can you speak at all to that one in Glenn's absence?
And I think Terry probably addressed it too, because the Athletic Council has developed an evaluation policy that assists the coaches as they solicit opinions from both parents and athletes. I know that it was done with the spring coaches. That is, parents filled out evaluations of the coaches. I know that it was done in hockey, but I'm not sure about basketball.
You know,
I wouldn't see them. They go directly to the coach and to the athletic director.
I'm not looking for an evaluation of the coach. I'm looking for an evaluation of the player,
Done by the coach.
so that the player is finding out something about his or her skills, so if they want to work on them over the summer or do something to make them better prepared to be eligible for the team the next year, they can get that. Now, I don't think that's an unreasonable request, and this board has said every quarter when this comes up that that's something they want. And if the coaches aren't doing that, then I think they need to be held accountable for it.
I don't
And so
believe
who
it.
supervises them?
I don't believe it was in place during the winter, through the winter at least. I don't know about the spring. I know it was talked about, but I don't know about it. And we have an athletic council thing coming up. I'll take it up there and make sure that it gets on the agenda.
Okay, but...
And I can find out where it's gone, why it
All
hasn't
right,
gone.
because the athletic council doesn't recommend the hiring of coaches, right? This is done by the athletic director,
Yeah,
I'm
the
assuming with the approval of the principal, right?
Yes.
So, doesn't anyone ask the question that says, the board has asked that you evaluate your players, give your kids some feedback. Have you done that?
I think the question would be whether or not it's required to be in writing, or whether or not verbal communication constitutes sufficient passing on of the information.
There was a
You could
time
make
when
up a
each
written
player,
evaluation
at least in the girls' basketball program, got some kind of an assessment of their skills, how they started out at the beginning, how they finished up, if they were going to summer camps, what to work on. And they had something that they could look at, and then came the following fall, the coach would say, well, did you do this? And
Most of
so,
your camps do those stuff.
right, and so,
Madeline, I know that this program was put into place for next year because I know that all the contracts that are now issued for coaches since the springtime have that clause in the coaching contract. I can't testify to the status of it before this past spring. Dave?
And that was brought up at the board meeting, I'm not sure when. I brought that back to Glenn Olson and told him that it would be part of the contract and part of the expectations of the coaches. I can speak as a parent of a boys soccer, boys hockey, and baseball player that there were evaluations done in each of those sports. I can't say for certain about girls basketball, if that's what you were asking about. I can't say for certain that that was done, but I know it certainly is an expectation now and will be in the future. And it was this spring as well.
okay, so I could feel comfortable that I'm going to get
We started
finally.
with all the contracts in the spring, we started with that new clause.
So that I can assume the softball players and the baseball players and all of those people are that. I think that's all the questions I have on it.
Bill, did you have a question?
Well, I was going to recall the board meeting when the subject was discussed before, but Dick has done that. I do have another question, though. The coaching salaries, how are those computed? Are we still using
No.
Okay,
No,
we've got a
it's
new
been
formula?
changed. The only thing that isn't on the new formula is the people who have been in those positions for 5, 6, 7 years have been held at the same level they were rather than decrease their pay amounts.
Okay, would it be possible to get a list of the different salaries, or
Yes.
Yeah.
some
We have that program for the
way
next
of-
meeting in July
Okay.
to bring in the whole new package.
Okay.
I had a question regarding the summer school. How many students are served by that program?
Ellie, would you have an idea? Oh, John, excuse me. You're right here.
130.
And they're all Rutland City residents or tuition students.
Actually, we sort of hope that that will probably increase this summer because of our work with the rec department and sharing some programs or facilities.
Well, we have the registration now, it's 130.
130?
And it had been, the past couple of years, between 110 and 120, so it has increased a little.
Maybe it's the rec department hopes to see a gain with some of the busing that's going to be there.
I think so.
Anything else regarding the personnel memorandum? If not, all those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Ma'am. Ms. Crowley.
Since Jack Adams, the new sixth grade teacher, is here tonight, I welcome the opportunity to at least introduce him to the Board of School Commissioners. So this is Jack Adams, and I know you have a summary of his background, and he's a proven person since he is in long-term sub at the middle school, our cousins next door, so we look forward to having him work with us.
Welcome permanently to the school system, Jack.
Thank you.
At this time, having asked the board for permission, I would move us to item 7 under the superintendent's report, item B4 regarding the insurance renewal.
Should be all set. Yes, thank you. I'd like to introduce Donald Condon. He's the consultant that the board hired in the spring to do our bidding, evaluation, and recommendations for the renewal of our insurance package. And at this point, I'm going to turn over the meeting to Don, and I have some handouts on his recommendation.
Evening. I have to say, having children in Rice and CBU, that I'd like to see all of your teams focus less on winning down here. Would support that. What I'd like you to do is walk you through this evening quick. I understand you're busy, and I'd like to walk you through a quick example of how this whole process occurred. We were engaged. My firm is a licensed insurance consulting firm. We sell no insurance whatsoever. We provide strictly expertise to our clients. The first part of the analysis was to determine who had the potential to provide insurance for the school district. And we interviewed 7 different agencies. They each proposed companies that they felt they had the clout and the ability to provide the insurance. We ended up with basically 3 companies, and what I'd like to do is just walk you through this process. I can figure out how to... You have a handout there that will... Everybody see that okay? I have to kind of stand out of your way. Basically, this is the first page of the summary that we just provided, or in the process of providing. We ended up with Kenny Pike, Don Connor, Mid-Vermont Agency, and the Hull Maynard Agency, which was assigned the Vermont School Board Insurance Trust. After evaluating all of their responses, and I'll walk you through some of the examples, it's our conclusion, our recommendation, that the school district seek their insurance through Kenny Pike, Don Connor, using 2 insurance companies, which is the current carrier Peerless, and in a new program for school leaders, or school board liability, which is written by the Royal. Give you an idea of the depth of the program, this is the table of contents that went out. The process of bidding your insurance is critical in various, everyone has to have the same information. It has to be correct. And you have to identify all of the pertinent concerns that the district has that is not addressed in the standard insurance policy. So the various endorsements, it was a 54-page proposal that went out that they had to respond to, and I'll show you examples. But it dealt with all your various property insurance, everything the school district owns, from the lawnmowers to the buildings, to the sports equipment, the band equipment, all of that was addressed. It goes through the boiler machinery. General liability, the classifications, professional people you have, vocational school, fleet liability, your busing, the crime exposure, workers' compensation, and the school board liability, which I always find is close to your hearts. So that's the type of program that went out. Give you an example. One of the critical aspects of an insurance policy is who's it going to protect? Who is going to be insured by this policy? This is the cover sheet, or the first page, basically, of the information. And we identified who is actually insured by this program. And there have been some changes to your previous existing. The Student Crafts Corporation in the past was insured separately because it was viewed as a standalone. Legally, that nonprofit entity exists solely to serve your vocational carpentry and vocational school. This board controls the budget. If you discontinue, then they would have to go out on their own. You provide full-time staff, and instead of having their insurance out there standing separately where you could have lawsuits between the 2, we've included it into this program. And the insurance companies saw the reasoning behind that, and they've agreed to it. And then, of course, all of the various school-sponsored Parent-Teacher Association and your Rutland boosters. In our program, what the agents do is we go through and we give questions. And all these questions are designed around either exclusions or limitations within the policies. Then what the agent has to do is go through there. This broadening endorsement here is especially for schools, and you had some concerns here that other schools are just becoming involved with and we had to address. But as you can see, we asked, can you do this? Yes or no? And what is the dollar amount for this change to the standard insurance policy? And each one of the agents had to respond with a yes or no and a dollar, which we then added up. Just for your information, the psychologist, you employed 2 psychologists. This is a new area in Vermont. There are only about 3 or 4 school districts that have psychologists actually on their staff. They're excluded in every insurance policy out there. They have no individual professional coverage under all those policies. It is covered, and actually Kenny Pike had covered it last year also. But the Vermont School Board Insurance Trust not only excludes the professional exposure, but they exclude the school itself for any lawsuits arising from that. So those are the areas that are particular that you have to address within the policies. One of the critical programs starting last year was, how is the workers' comp priced? Everyone's been hearing about workers' comp in Vermont for years. Starting in July of '94, the state backed away from standardizing the rates and said, insurance companies, here are the loss factors. Here's how much the insurance for this classification is costing in Vermont. We're not going to give you a rate anymore. You set your own. So each one of the agents then, it's no longer able for us to just go in and monitor it. Now each one has to provide exactly what they used as a payroll, a rate, the premiums, and then all the various calculations they use on the side. The school board liability, there is no standard, so there are specific things within the school board liability that we want to address and to confirm that are here. Will they provide defense costs for claims outside of monetary fines? Most of them do not. Do they provide coverage for discrimination, hiring and firing practices, full prior acts? Those are the questions. Will they provide a 60-day notice of intent to cancel? Those were the questions that were put out. What I'd like to do is give you a couple quick examples of how it was addressed and then wrap it up with your total there. This is an example of the buildings and contents. This is out of the report. It goes through the various questions. Each one of these had a question that they answered. And you can see there that to provide $46,696,000 of building and contents across everything you own. The various coverages were from Kenny Pike, $18,000, $22,000 for Mid-Vermont, and Vermont School Board Insurance Trust was $33,000. Then you have to go through and add in various changes to that. If you look down through tools, equipment, pollution, and we're recommending that you consider as a board earthquake on your structures such as this. All those add back in to the costs. Liability questionnaire, does it provide coverage? Well, let's start at the top because this is something I think that most boards have never addressed. Medical payments to students that are injured on playgrounds during their facilities are not normally insured. And in fact, it's recommended as a procedure that you do not insure every skinned knee, broken ankle, broken toe, chipped tooth, because you'll find yourself uninsured or paying a lot. It's that kind of dollar exchanges. You pay the insurance company and they pay the kids and you just keep paying out of pocket. In most cases, and I'm sure you do too, you put out a student accident insurance policy that they have an option to buy into. They have their health policy. So we ask for it, do they provide medical payments to students? They do. The least expensive is $8 per student. Doesn't make sense. So we don't recommend it. Does it cover all blanket teachers? Both student teachers from colleges, whatever? Yes. Does it cover all volunteers for your schools? Yes. Are all board members covered for any actions they do for the school? Yes. And it just goes on, and we analyze all these. Are your guidance professionals provided for malpractice suits? Yes. Are your psychologists provided in the school? Yes. Physical therapists and in your school broadcasting program, is it covered? And all those are yes. The key point, and I'll get out of your meeting here, this is the summary that you have in front of you. Each one of those areas of coverage was summarized and compared And as you can see, we call this first part, where it says total premium, we call that the package. That's what an insurance company can come in and bond together, put together in one program. It ranges from $54,001 for Kinney Pike Doan Connor to $66,000 for the Hall Maynard Visbit program. Then you put a $5 million umbrella or a $5 million buffer of liability on top of that, so that this school board has, this school has $6 million. And you'll see that in the brackets are the individual costs of that $5 million, and it jumps, you add that premium on. Educators liability, $1 million. You're covered by, the $5 million goes excess of that in some cases, in one it does not, which is the Visbit program. Then your workers' comp, earthquake, we've separated out to be looked at, and your totals. Kinney Pike Doan Connor came in at $118,008 versus $123 and $149. Price-wise and coverage-wise, Kinney Pike Doan Connor has the superior program, and we recommend it. I have any questions, I'll be glad to address them or explain anything in the process.
Alan?
Did they answer no to anything?
Yes, there are no's in there.
So could you tell me what some of those no's are?
Sure. None of them will quote a $5,000 deductible for your property because they've given it so inexpensively that it just doesn't make sense. Two of the companies will not provide full glass coverage, which is Kinney Pike Doan Connor and Mid-Vermont. We ask for broad glass coverage. No matter how much vandalism occurs, we wanted coverage across the board. What you're getting is $500,000 per pain and $5,000 per incident.
I should say significant no's.
Oh, okay. Significant no's? Well, that's, the glass is questionable. It's not actually a no. No, there are no significant no's that cause us any real major concern.
And
that,
Kinney Pike, do they have any?
No. In fact, Kinney Pike was recommending and intended to go with a different school board liability policy, and when we went through the questionnaires with them of the various things that weren't quite as good as we'd like, then the decision was made yesterday morning to change to the Royal across the board for all carriers. So we did not go with Peerless for their school board liability. Just looking through here quickly on my draft notes. Basically, they could meet all the requirements. As I said, Visbit could not provide the psychologist. That was a major no against the Vermont School Board Insurance Trust. They recommended that you buy an individual malpractice policy, and then the school would have had a problem because if the school had been sued, there had been no coverage. Other than that, there were no really significant no's.
Okay.
Is this a one-year contract, one-year proposal?
All insurance policies are year-to-year today. What we have recommended and what we recommend to the client and we put in there is that we recommend unless your coverage changes drastically or you have problems in pricing, if your price changes or your coverage changes, that you consider staying with them for 3 years. Normally you make that kind of proposal up front to them. That's what we did based upon discussion with Bob. That allows them to have the motivation knowing that you're going to be with them for 3 years, and they make the profit after they spend all the time doing the analysis and changing the policies to meet our specifications. Then that program will continue for 3 years. But one of the requirements is they provide to Bob 45 to 60 days in advance notice of any major change or any major pricing, and that will give you enough time to look at it and respond accordingly. I would recommend you stay with them for 3 years. Yes, sir.
Who checks to make sure that the policy conforms with the specifications that you've laid out in representation?
I'm on for another 60 days. We read the policies and make sure they all meet them. It's a good question. I've been doing this for 15 years and I've never had one come in the way it was bid.
That's what I was wondering.
Any other questions? If not, I thank you very much.
Just a comment that the $118,840 is well within our budget. We have budgeted $155,000 for this line item. So we do have some.
And your coverage is improved.
You have to still make some adjustments when you work out some details.
Well, probably we're adding a school bus, so that's going to,
cost us a little bit more money, and we might still make some minor adjustments to some of the policies, but I still see a substantial surplus in the line items for insurance for next year.
This is a Cadillac program. In other words, there are some coverages in here, for instance, earthquake. This is everything that I, as a professional, owe you to look at and to buy. There is a possibility. We have everything broken down by price item. For instance, earthquake, $2,000. I will tell you why I recommend it, but there are still some areas that you may not want to, as a board, decide to purchase, or your business manager may not feel it's feasible. They add up to $300, $800 or whatever. But that would be the maximum that you're looking at right now.
Can you explain to them why you recommend earthquake?
We recommend earthquake for all structures that are built like this, what they call rigid construction, multi-story. I don't recommend that you buy $46 million worth, but in my experience, when they happen, you'll have cracks in your foundation. You'll have doors that are problems. A lot of people say, earthquake. I've actually had a claim in Vermont for one. Pardon?
I think we're on a fault.
I'm not sure about here, but there are faults that run through Vermont. There's a major one through Chittenden County. And so what we're recommending is you purchase the protection for those minor repairs that will happen. If we get one of a magnitude where it all goes down, we're all going to go to the government anyway. So it's the small out-of-pocket stuff that you should be protecting yourself from. Yes. And you're getting a good deal for $2,000. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Doc.
Thank you.
If there are no further questions, the chair would entertain a motion that the board approve the insurance renewal as presented to the board in the June 25th, 1995 recommendation from our paid licensed insurance consultant, Donald Condon.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion or question?
I sure feel more comfortable this year than I did last year.
And I also understand that Chuck has reviewed it and has his blessing as well.
I won't charge you extra for doing the truck. Thank you.
Thank you. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Thank you. Instructional development, Dr. Brothers.
Thank you again. I issued a one-page memorandum to the school commissioners describing our plans for health education and health services from K to 8 for next year. And that involves using Michelle Pajasic as the nurse in charge of our K-8 program, coordinating the program. That's what I will refer to her as. And then taking on an LPN professional, 2 registered nurses. The first to serve at the intermediate school building with Michelle, and the second 2 RN personnel to serve at the 2 primary school buildings. We believe this model will give us a real good health service program and health education program from K to 8. And Michelle will specifically be involved in doing teaching in grade 8 for 2 hours a day. That new program requires that you supported about a month ago. And what I'd like to do is take a few minutes and also explain to you what the funding mechanism is for some of this, and this ties back into that speech and language pathologist that we spoke about a few minutes ago. Let me just pull forward this sheet of paper. Federal government has all types of acronyms, and I'm not going to try to tell you what this stands for. Ellie could if it was necessary, but it is Medicaid funding. That's where it comes from, Medicaid funding. In the bank, we have been filling out appropriate required paperwork. Our nurses, guidance people, other people that fit into the correct blanks, I guess, on the applications have been filling out the paperwork. And we have been collecting Medicaid funds 4 times a year. We get a check. Really didn't start until this year, until we got our first check in. But since February '94, we've been entering into this process. So we have $58,000 in the bank right now. And by continuing the same process for next year, we're well assured that we will be probably acquiring another $45,000 conservatively next year, for a total of about $103,000. Now this will provide for us several positions. Home and school coordinator position, we haven't done anything yet about going out and hiring someone and bringing a recommendation to you. But this is a position that would service an intermediate school building for next year and give Lorraine and her people just another set of hands for coordinating activities between the home and the school building and working with parents. Prior to Bill Harrington going over to the middle school in his present role, he served in this type of role for us school district-wide, and he was very, very effective. The two registered nurses we can pay for. This is what they would earn, 180 days, 6.5 hours, plus the benefit package. And the total of these positions would come to $77,000. This would leave us $26,000 left over from these funds. And by putting together a small piece, $10,000 of one of these federal special education grants, which I'll be asking you to approve tonight, we can assign $10,000 from that, take approximately $10,000 from the special education reimbursement formulas, and put together a package of $46,000 and hire and pay for the speech and language person for next year to get us up a little closer to speed where we're supposed to be in meeting the needs of kids with speech deficits. Now, this is a one-year program. In some cases, even if this program continues for the year after, and we collect this much more money, we still will have to probably cut back on some of these things, unless we can somehow, in our budget, find some other way to maybe still secure some of them. But I want to be very careful and tell people that right now, this is a one-year program. But the money is there, we can buy the services, and I think we should do that, because it'll help us with this whole new K-8 configuration we're running, and it'll just give us some more help around to assure the safety and well-being of our children. And we have the funds to do it. And if we don't spend the money, then some other city will spend it somewhere in the country.
I've talked, oh, I'm sorry. I think it would be helpful if you let the board and the public know what the limitations are with the funds. In other words, what can we use them for? Reducing taxes, et cetera, and so forth.
I did pull out, had Ellie pull out for me some of the instructions that we got from the State Department, the Health Department, about the use of this money. And for the past year, we've been clearly told that we could not use the money for supplanting existing expenditures for such services. What that means is that you can't pay for your existing programs with this money. It's the second sentence in the first paragraph. We've been very clear about that up front. The types of programs you can use it on is sort of outlined in bold on the last page of this handout. Home visiting, parent education, school health services, dropout prevention, on-site child care.
So to confirm what Michael said, you cannot use this money to lower taxes.
That's correct.
I had asked the question, Madeline. We're already providing these services, which are reimbursable from Medicaid funding. Our existing staff have been providing the service and submitting the forms. So I raised the logical question, since we're already expending the funds to pay for those people, and we're generating the revenues, can't that come back and pay for their salaries? In other words, it only made logical sense to me. But in fact, they're only allowing us to expand preventive and support services, and if we don't expand, it goes back. And I have problems with that, but that's the way it's written at this time.
I don't have a question about the funding, but I do have a question about something in the memo, and that is that some of the RNs would be used, or one of them, I'm assuming, on a rotating basis, to come back to Library Avenue over the lunch hour to assist with medications. My concern is that recess time, which is the lunch hour, is probably the time accidents are most likely to occur at the primary schools. And so is that appropriate to take an RN from there when they might be needed there?
We have had our library aid paraprofessionals trained in first aid, and they have been serving in that capacity the past couple of years. What we're really doing is pulling away from them the need to provide that service all day. I could ask them to provide that service for an hour to an hour and a half, perhaps in one of the buildings. So that's how we will address that matter. That's a point well taken.
So only one of them. Go ahead,
Yes.
John.
You said that we can't use this money to pay for an existing program. So once we hire these people, okay, then we get another $45,000. That $45,000 can then only be used to expand the program further. We can't use it to pay for any of these people again.
I don't know the answer to that question. If it
Sounds
is,
logical, John.
Because that
Page
means we
22.
then have to pick all of this up in our current budget and then hire somebody or do something else with the $45,000.
if we can continue some of these services with that Medicaid funding, then I think we have to reevaluate this program a year from now.
Right.
Because that's just another catch-22.
It's certainly important,
We
though.
didn't enter into it with that understanding that a year later we'd have to magnify it again.
But we have said, I believe, that we think some type of nursing services should be available in the schools all day, not necessarily a certified nurse teacher. So I would hope that that would be our goal, to maintain some kind of nursing services.
If those costs for an RN, we're not paying for nurse teachers.
And so Michelle is certified to teach health. That
Yes,
was
she
my
is.
question.
That's what she'll be doing.
And one
Both
of,
our two nurses that will be here next year will be doing teaching.
and one of the things we'll be looking for in light of the report last week is that also finding a way for the following year to put health in the 7th grade.
We'll be looking at that, yes, part of the budget process. We'll have to await that whole process and how we proceed through it.
Richard, suppose we don't spend $103,000, and suppose we spend approximately $73,000. Can we carry over that 30-some thousand dollars into next year and combine it with the $45,000 to have $70-some thousand dollars to carry the program for 2 years?
We've been carrying that 58,000 now for
That's what I was
a year and a
wondering.
half, yeah.
They don't say you have to spend it by such and such a date?
Maybe you shouldn't ask.
Yeah, right.
Well, I'm getting a positive answer from the staff about your question.
Okay, the reason I ask that is if I look at a program and our need to do the the family education program, and everyone acknowledging that that was an important component, it would seem fiscally responsible for us to take a look at trying to see if, in order to keep this program going for 2 years instead of just 1 year, that we look at the possibility of trying to do that. My eye zooms in on the home and school coordinator, and I'm not sure that that's the best thing to do with Lorraine sitting out in the audience, but if I take a look at what I feel is important and what programs I would like to make sure that we continued, I think the speech and language pathologist and the 2 RNs, to me, are very important programs, and I would prefer to see us try to plan for a 2-year project as opposed to a 1-year project. And in doing that, if we can carry the money over, and I see the money that works right there, if we eliminated the home and school coordinator, we should have enough money to do the same thing next year.
In 95, 96?
95, no, we have 95, 96 coming up, 96, 97.
Well, we haven't done anything about that position yet, or actually these two either, so we can put on hold somewhat and think about it and get some more information prior to your next meeting.
Yeah, I mean, if we can do that kind of planning and working with the numbers, since it doesn't appear that anyone thought about that particular approach, I would like to get input on what might be the best way for us to plan and spend that money, and to confirm whether or not we can do that.
Let's plan on doing that part of it, but some reactions?
I like the sounds of reducing the amount spent this year in the hopes of carrying it out for the 2 years. However, I think that the home and school coordinator position is critical. I think that was an identified need early on in our budget process this year, which was some kind of guidance type position at the intermediate level. So I'm glad to see that it's come back. I would, however, believe that there might be a different way that we might deliver nursing services, whether it's in a part-time capacity, whether it's LPNs, whether it's aides, or something along that line that might reduce that amount so that we can come up with the additional funds. Then I think we should be looking at that.
We can look at both. We can look at this whole package right here and investigate some costs and ideas.
Lorraine and David?
I do want to speak to the homeschool coordinator because it was on our wish list, as Cheryl remembers, in the budget. And I think, I certainly understand, though, what Bill is saying about trying to provide continuity over 1 year. So I guess it's a value judgment. The clinician that is in the building, our problem with clinicians has been that because of their relationship with associates, they can deal with a narrow piece of the population, and a lot of their time is used up meeting the paperwork requirements and connected with the associates. There are children and families in need of guidance services that don't have access through the clinician. And so putting the home school coordinator in was an attempt to do that in a building where there are going to be 750 students. And I would just say that without that, you have a middle school that has a clinician for half our population, but also has a support counselor, and you have guidance services at the high school. I think it's a real need in a building with 750 children.
Well, that's why we had outlined it here. The school-based clinician that Lorraine just talked about are the folks hired in collaboration with Rutland Community Services. There are 6 of those, and they've been scattered around our school district and very effective. This is the first year we did that, and we're certainly going to continue that relationship next year. So they've proven very valuable to us.
How much do we pay them?
We contribute about $17,000 or $18,000 to their salaries, and Rutland Community Services contributes the balance of it. It's about 50-50 with the salary and total salary and benefit package. We each contribute about half. So
Per person?
Per person.
So is this homeschool coordinator in place of this clinician?
No.
This is in addition to?
In addition to. You'd have 1, 2, or the clinicians in your building?
Well, locally we have 2.
2.
At the moment we have 1. And that's another factor. Their turnover is constant. I mean, we lost several this year, and they just didn't begin to build rapport with families and perhaps our most needy children emotionally. And then if they're gone, you're trying to rebuild that relationship all over again.
Yeah, I have a question for Lorraine. Based on about the school clinicians, if the school clinicians were our employees, as they had been in the past, would the situations they're working in require as much paperwork as the current scenario has them doing?
No,
it would not. So one of the things I think that we need to evaluate is, yes, we're getting these people for half the price, but if we're getting a quarter of the work out of them in real contact and need, then maybe it isn't such a good program. So I think that's something that we ought to be looking at over the year. And even if we're only getting a quarter of the exposure, for half the price, then maybe we need to go back to the other way and have less people with more exposure. Just something, more time with people, just something to think about.
Could I just comment on that, that the types of people that you're talking about that we have now and that we used to have are two very different type of people. And the quality of service that we get now is 10 times what it was with the other positions that we had. Granted, they're with a smaller number, but they're much more intense, and I guess I wouldn't want to just quickly dismiss them being less effective because they don't serve as many kids.
Yeah, I didn't say to do that. I said we ought to look at what we're getting and what we're paying for and what options we might have.
Okay, well, I want to point that out.
Yeah, thank you. Also, I think we ought to look at is that in using these type of people, is that, let me say this, because I'm just general familiar with the program. I'm just saying some of the things we ought to look at, is that in using these type of people, we ought to be looking at, is there a way that we can contract individuals and get them for the duration of the time so that we aren't changing the person 3 times during the year and building up rapport 3 times, because no matter what the quality of service is, if you have 3 startups over the period of the year, you've lost a lot of valuable time. So that's something we may also want to look at.
I think one of the difficulties with the new program this year was just building our relationship with the Rutland Community Services, also in the whole collaborative hiring process. We put 2 organizations interfacing together, and we both have to go through some learning lessons as you go through the hiring process and assign the clinicians to work in our buildings, and they're sort of supervised by us, but they're also supervised by Rutland Community Services. And we've learned a lot from our experience this year. We hope to have even better experiences next year.
Is there a formal process where our key people and their key people will sit down and review the good parts and the bad parts of last year's program so that we are sure that we're on an improvement?
It's already been done to a certain extent. I'd like Ellie to speak to a little more to that one.
Yeah, we did do that this spring, and we had the clinicians involved. We got input from the teachers, we got input from the administrators. We also got input from their administrators, and we sat down and talked about some of the difficulties and ways we could improve and the services that we do get from them. We also did somewhat evaluate whether this is a program we needed to continue or whether we did want to go with the process of hiring our own people. And as Dr. Brothers said, this is our first year, and we said, okay, we think we're on the right road. We did get good services. We thought we got what we needed for our money. We also have direct connection to their psychiatrist that's on staff, which really helped us a lot this year. It wasn't an out-of-district cost like in the past we've had to pay for over and above the services that we presently get. And it is a Medicaid-funded position, and that's why there's the pay for. So I felt for this year, and I think we as an administrative team felt that it was worth continuing for another year and again evaluate it again next spring.
David, finally.
The program has another name. It's called Success Beyond 6, and it was launched by the Dean Administrator in the spring and summer of 1993. And I was part of that. I remember the very first application we had was from the city of Rutland. It had to be signed out by the Commissioner of Education and the Secretary of the Agency of Human Services and by the Governor's Office. So Rutland was the first one. And the Agency of Human Services also looked to Rutland to experiment with a different kind of eligibility formula, which would assess the time associated, particularly in health services, and not require all the paperwork. And they did that the first year. And that is to ascertain the number of kids who are Medicaid eligible. And as you know, in Rutland City, we have a very high number of Medicaid eligible youngsters. And then to allocate money on the basis of that assessment. And that involves very little paperwork after the first run-through and the assessment's done. The other way to allocate is to do what the clinicians do, and that is to keep track of the number of kids they see who are Medicaid eligible. They're allowed to see non-Medicaid eligible kids too. And that is allowable by the government. So the important thing for us to remember is that we're able to access the money, and back to the use of the funds, it is allowable to expand services, and then to answer your question, John, to keep those people on board as long as you started out with an expansion of services. But the danger is this, and the caveat that maybe Dr. Brothers had mentioned, and that is that from what we hear coming down from Washington, Medicaid may be on the chopping block, and it's better to be in the door rather than waiting at the threshold when those cuts come down. Because what I've been told by Con Hogan is that when they do make those cuts, they'll freeze what's already in place. And if you're not in the door, then you won't be able to get in the door.
I really think the homeschool coordinator is very important, but I was wondering if it would be possible to look at the list of your entire staff, K through 12, and see what teachers are certified to teach health that perhaps don't necessarily do so. And maybe there will be a way to utilize some of them to deliver that health portion or the family life curriculum in grade 7 in the 96-97 school year without additional cost to the district.
Okay, we'll look at that idea also and bring some thoughts back at the next board meeting. Before we go ahead with any of these other positions, especially well, these positions. So we'll come back to the board. The next piece I'd like to just speak about is our K-8 library media services and computer technician. They're not exactly related, so let's treat them as two separate pieces. I also issued you a memorandum about the library, K-8 library program, and the more we started looking at it and thinking about what we were doing, the more we began to question whether or not we were going in the right direction for next year. So I'm seriously considering, and I've discussed this with various principals, with Kathy Hart, is perhaps organizing K-8 around one professional librarian next year to see how things operate for us, and not reduce one of the library aides that we had planned in our budget to reduce, and thereby keeping at least one person in every library at the elementary level and the middle school level all the time. And that's something I wanted to propose for you tonight. There's something that I think I'm interested in moving on and seeing how we can operate that way next year. Evaluate it and see if we want to continue or maybe adjust and do something else in fiscal year 97. Can I answer any questions?
No.
Well, I have a lot of concerns about this. Dr. Brothers did speak to me about it, and I have given it a lot of thought. I certainly believe there's a way to restructure library services. But if I look at our total school population, K-12, which is probably in excess of 2,500 students, and I look at the public school approval standard of one librarian for every 300, I recognize the fact that that would be an impossible standard to meet, because that would require having in excess of 8 professionals. But having 2 professionals really, I don't believe, meets the needs of the program, because you're not having people in the elementary or the other libraries that are particularly trained in delivering library services. They're warm bodies who will check out books, be there when classes come down, help students if they have questions, be there in some cases for first aid services, but they're really not trained in delivering the kind of library services that are going to prepare students to use the facility that we have at the high school. And I really would like to see us look at this kind of carefully. I do think we need, this district with the equipment that we have, needs a technologist. I can fully support that. And wondered if perhaps it wouldn't be good to have Leader Schubert, who is the Department of Education's school library media consultant, meet with some of the principals and the school librarians and the library aides to see just what we're doing here, because I think people think of libraries as places where you go and you check out books and nothing else happens there. And the end of our process is asking students to do a lot more. And while I believe the library aides we have are very good, I hate to see the fact that we are reducing a professional in an area where I think we need one. And I just don't want to see that we're just putting bodies places. When I look at the coaching appointments, and I see the tens of thousands of dollars we spend for athletics, and now we are finally making some movement if we have a homeschool coordinator for guidance, I really think we have to evaluate our library media program once and for all and say, what do we expect out of this? What kind of skills do we want students to have? And so I'm very uneasy about reducing a professional, especially when I hear there might be some insurance money extra, and we could fund the technologist and, you know, do that. But I don't want to just change library media services based on conversations with principals. I'd like to see someone outside who's kind of works with schools all over the state, and certainly works with schools who have budget problems, come in and look at this and give an unbiased viewpoint. So that would be something I would hope for.
I would pursue that, Madeline. This idea that I've suggested here is not there's no real change in finances at all. It's just a change in how we would want to handle the particular positions. If we were going to move ahead and reduce the library aid, well, even that isn't going to cause someone to lose a job, because we're going to put someone into one of the individual aid positions. So that person will still have a job with us. We do have some more of those individual aid slots to fill. So it can even be handled later in the summer. So we'll continue discussing that. That's not critical. The technology one is, well, as you know, I talked about this before at the board table. We didn't end up with a budget process in doing it. But at the end of the year, I want to point out to you that Bob tells me that our carryover now looks like it will be probably $10,000 over where we were in terms of budget development. We budgeted 25 as a carryover. He tells me now it'll be probably 35. We have the VAC rental that's been firmed up and signed since we've actually put our budget, put the final drafts in our budget. We could put together a package of $30,000 and do something to, I think, help ourselves next year. I guess I would suggest that we move ahead and try to do something like that. Especially when I saw what Twinfield was doing and the way they described the position, which is exactly the kind of thing that I've been thinking about. I just felt I had to bring it to your attention.
Somebody wish to make a motion to that effect?
I so move.
What grades are we covering?
K through 12.
Do we have
K
a
to
second?
second.
We have a motion and a second.
So the position covers K to 12.
K to 12.
I think it's very important for a district our size, with the investment that we have in computers and other audiovisual equipment, that you have someone who has experience. I might add to that some audiovisual experience to that. Someone who could clean your VCRs and related equipment. Other schools have that.
Cheryl?
This advertisement refers to teaching abilities, but not necessarily a teacher, is that right?
That's correct. There is no license in the state now for a position like this in the State Department, an education licensing system at all. It's just a novel, different kind of position. But the person coming through with this type of training wouldn't be coming through any sort of teacher preparation program yet. 5 years maybe, that might change.
Further question or discussion?
I don't like what we're doing. I am in favor of the position, but I'm very, very uncomfortable with the way we're proceeding We just spent 5 months going through a budget process. We haggled, we cut, we decided whether we wanted fine arts, and we approved the budget. And tonight I've sat here and saw 5 more positions approximately that we want to add that were not in the budget. I don't think it's good planning. If these had been presented as these are contingencies, if these come through or that come through, I'd be more comfortable with it. If we had not had an extremely warm winter last year, we wouldn't have had $100,000 and some odd shortfall in our contingency, and we'd be way in the hole. I don't think it's appropriate that we're taking money 2 meetings after we approved our budget and starting to spend it until we know where we stand during the year. Not withholding that I agree that this technology piece is very important, but we saw several positions on the board a few minutes ago. We saw another position here in technology. We see the possibility of putting on another professional staff in library, and I can't support the way we're proceeding. I'm very uncomfortable with it.
The library position was not an additional position in that conversation we just had. I accept everything you just said, Al.
Okay, other than the library was it was a half-time that we have now that we were going to let go?
And in turn, keep the aid, so there'd be a wash almost.
But the aid was cut in the budget last year.
That's correct.
Okay, so that was a swap. But some of the other stuff everything else has been additional this year.
That's correct.
And if we hire the technology, and we keep the aid, and we hire the professional, then it becomes additional.
Then,
and that was one of the scenarios that was tossed out by Madeline. So I'm uncomfortable with the way we're proceeding.
I have to agree with what Al just said. It's only been 24 hours since the alderman approved our budget, and we went in there saying it was bare bones, and now we're adding thousands of dollars that we knew we wanted before the budget was passed. And I don't feel comfortable with it.
I won't take a position to support or deny it. Let's keep things in perspective. The Medicaid stuff, I raise a question. I hate to see those counted as new positions because they're not taxpayer money. The technology, as an example, that was on our original list. And what we're talking about, what I believe the superintendent is talking about, now we have the VAC lease at Southeast. Now we have whatever else has come through here.
$10,000 in extra carryover money.
In additional carry. We're not talking tons of money, but I think in any budget, what you're doing is it's not so much we cut technology, we wanted to put it in, we didn't have the funding to do it. Now we're in a situation where as we get closer to year end and numbers are firmer, unfortunately, we are required to submit budgets and expectations before we do have all kinds of information. I mean, technology is not something that, gee, we've got money, let's go get it now. It was on the original list. That's just... Bill.
I'm going to sort of take Deb's position since Deb's not here. She has always said that we need...
She's going to love to hear that.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you. She's always said that we need a program, something laid out that spells out where technology fits into our overall program. And that we have a plan for exactly how it gets integrated. That we have a much better concept for what we're looking for in terms of the person to meet our needs. It does not seem to me a wise choice to go out and advertise and hire somebody until we put that piece in place first, that we get the input from each of the principals in terms of how they see that person integrating, how they see it all happening. It would be my hope that our assistant superintendent who looks at curriculum development and what's going on would see this as part of that piece. At that point in time when they came back with what I would believe would be a comprehensive program of really how it could be used, what you needed, what the skills had to be, I would feel more comfortable that it would be the right way to go. At this particular point, I'm feeling uncomfortable that we're sort of stepping off before we know exactly where it is. technology is a dangerous area. Sometimes you buy software that never gets utilized, but 10%. My fear is that we may need a person, but what we would get would not give us what we really need, and we need to define what that need is before we go buy somebody. So I think it's premature at this time, and I think it's a good concept. I think we've got the money for it, but I think it's premature without the necessary groundwork.
Cheryl?
I agree with Nancy and Al and Bill, and I certainly appreciate hearing a little bit of reservation about the expenditures. And I guess the part that I feel really uncomfortable about is if we've got an additional $30,000 that we found that wasn't budgeted for.
20,000.
Excuse me?
10,000 was budgeted.
Okay, for computer services. Okay, but not necessarily for this position?
That's correct.
Okay, so we're kind of taking it from 3 separate line items and combining it into an additional person. If we've got an additional $30,000 in our budget that we have the ability now to transfer into another portion of our budget, then I have the feeling that we didn't approach our budget process in an appropriate manner. I think that we should be looking at holding with what it is we budgeted for. And already this evening we have heard discussions about shifting funds from here to there in order to fund different initiatives than what we have discussed over the last several months. I do believe that we need a computer technologist or technician of some sort, but I also agree with Bill. We need to plan exactly what it is that we need for that person to do in order to bring us where this district needs to be so that we can be making the most effective use of the technology that we have in our buildings. And I would very much like to see that planning process start before any expenditure is made, and perhaps a recommendation for next year's budget could be included in our budget development process at that time.
Further discussion?
We still haven't received all the information from the city as to what we're going to get for monies. There's been no discussion from the Alderman Council yet as to how they're going to handle the pilot monies that they've known about for months now. And I think the formula is, what, 125 over 220, no, 125 over 220 times whatever that dollar figure is supposed to go to the schools to reduce the school tax. But we haven't heard a word from the city as to how that's going to be handled, or if they're just going to put it back into the city coffers and pretend that it's their money reducing tax again.
Are you talking about the
Payment in
pilot
lieu of
money?
taxes, yeah.
Okay. Has there been a determination that that
There has
should
been, to my knowledge,
definitely come to schools?
There's been an acknowledgement sent to the city, I was told.
Who is it that had determined that it was going to be coming to the schools? I mean, I don't know.
The law.
That's what the law says?
Well, that's what the taxes are.
It's reduced property taxes.
It's based on a property tax, and 120 over 225 is what our property tax is for school districts.
I guess I'd like to hear a little bit more about what pilot is all about.
It's payment in lieu of taxes for state-owned buildings that aren't paid taxes on.
Well,
So if they're going to
I
pay
understand
the tax that would have been paid on that if it were owned privately, the portion of that should go to the school district, should go to the school district.
I have a suggestion, Terry. Dr. Brothers, would you be willing to request the city treasurer to come to our next regular board meeting and explain the pilot program and what his recommendation will be to the Board of Aldermen on how to handle it, and what portions he's going to recommend go to the city and what portions will go to the school system?
What sort of direction before you do that?
That's separate to the city.
Yes.
I'd just like to respond a second to Cheryl. One of the things as elected officials that I think we have to pay attention to is not being locked in and realizing that a budget is a dynamic document, that is subject to change, it's subject to things that you can't anticipate when you create that budget. It's a guideline. When we created that budget, we didn't know that we were going to get $10,000 from the Vermont Achievement Center. We didn't know that we'd have an extra $10,000. It's then our job to find the best ways to use that money. If we can spend $10,000 that we've allocated for computer services in a better fashion and get our own technician on staff instead of hiring out, then that seems to me like a wise use of the money, and we need to be flexible enough and not feel that we're locked into a budget, because we do have the ability to move money from one line item to the other and realize that we have to be flexible. So I would hate to see us, because of all of the discussions that have occurred recently, change a policy of what I think is good planning and responsiveness and using our budget in an appropriate fashion. I think John Casarino, when he said that the school board members are all elected officials and they deserve a great deal of recognition for that, and he stood up for us, deserves an applaud from this board. And I think we've done a good job, and I'd like to see that we continue to be flexible in the way we deal with our budget and not be intimidated in any way by the aldermen and their approach to what they've been saying.
Further discussion of the motion? If not,
What's the motion?
to fund the technology position. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
No.
No.
The motion is defeated.
That would conclude my portion of the instructional development piece.
But I would ask that at an appropriate time when we do have more information that it comes back, but it not be a buried item.
I've so noted on my little yellow pad here, and at some point, an appropriate point, we will be coming back with some ideas.
Building project, Al?
Yes, thank you. Just give you a quick rundown on what's been happening over the last couple of weeks. The principal and secretary's offices in the intermediate school have been set up. The recreation department has moved out of the intermediate school and is now set up in a new portion in the Dana school. And I understand that they're quite pleased with being at Dana school. That's working well. The 3 rooms that they were utilizing in the intermediate school have already had the ceilings dropped, and the existing carpet has been shampooed, and we're ready to move into those rooms. The phone system has been installed at the intermediate school. The numbers will be published soon. The contract cleaners should be finished by the end of this week. All carpet finish work should be done by Friday. Smoke detectors are in place and wired into the fire alarm system, as are all the magnetic door holders. The non-breakable glass for the lower portion of the trophy case is on order. The shelving has been installed in all the existing closets as per requested by the teachers. The northeast school should be all moved to the intermediate school by tomorrow, and we will then begin to move the northwest school. The northeast library has been reshelved for the K2, and the catalog shelf list will be all complete by Friday. Right now, there's an awful lot of work to be done. We are on schedule and monitoring it on a daily basis. Any questions? Okay, end my report.
Thank you. Superintendent's report, Dr. Brothers.
Thank you again. Speaking about the rec department, I would like to just mention that we received a lovely letter from Lee Dallin thanking the baseball team and coach, the young man came back from the pros. For coming out and helping with the support the Crowley race on that Sunday. Did you notice that they were there?
I was so blurry eyed when I came across the finish line, I didn't see anybody.
But Leaf
Came across the finish line.
Leaf sent us a letter to the high school thanking the coach and thanking the school for providing that kind of help, and it's that kind of help that just makes the city a better place to live and work in when you have that kind of collaboration going on. Wanted to speak for just a little bit about the condition of education report. That's a report that came in since our last board meeting. That was a report that was the subject of the article in the newspaper last Thursday.
But not the article in today's paper.
I know. The article in today's paper was a subject, a report issued yesterday by the commissioner. That was the Quality and Cost Commission study that was commissioned by the State School Board about a year ago. Those reports are supposed to be out and in our hands probably early next week. They are running them off this week up in the State Department. This report, the Condition of Education report that was issued, is the one that cited us as having the lowest cost per student in the state of Vermont. That was news to your superintendent. And certainly, you know,
Was that lowest cost per student or lowest cost for basic services?
Lowest cost per student for basic services.
Basic services, okay, but not necessarily lowest cost per student.
Yes, when Jerry Cassell says they factor out technical education, special education, Bob?
And transportation.
And transportation. And what's left, they simply divide by the number of kids in the school districts around the state and rank order everybody. Now, it's nice to be in a position where you're the most cost-effective school district. On the other hand, I don't know that it's nice to be in the bottom and that you're spending the least amount for instruction for your kids in the school system. However, on the other hand, the other consideration is that with the portfolio program in grades 4 and grade 8, that to the degree that it discriminates between school districts, which is really not a high level of discrimination, our scoring, our assessment reports show us to be at least sitting right in the middle, if and ahead on one of the areas. So that's a complimentary part of the document, which I put in each one of your packets. I would just like to speak to a couple other highlights. The report indicates that 31% of our high school students were participating in tech education in 1994. That's a high, good number. It should move up and be a couple points higher, I think, in the future. 17% of our children receive Chapter 1 services. That's is an indication of the needy young people in our city. 1994, our percent of tax revenues from the state sources were 18%. Certainly not among the highest in the state by far. So we are funding a lot more of your education here from the local tax dollars than a lot of other places are in the state. On top of the first page I'm reading from is a brief summary of the Vermont portfolio assessment. And in 8th grade math and 4th grade writing and 8th grade writing, we fall right about on the median. Where in 4th grade math, we are at least moving ahead of the median in terms of the achievements of our youngsters in that program. Pardon me?
What's your question?
Sure.
See where it says Vermont maximum? Is that a school?
That's the highest score of one of the school
supervisory
districts,
unit.
supervisory unit.
Okay.
There aren't many like us, though, where we are the only school, right?
It's about 7 or 8 where we are a K-12 single board school district. About 7 or 8 others like us. The biggest other one like us is Burlington. The other ones are smaller. Winooski is another one, which is K-12, one board. Risk factors on the bottom right-hand corner of the top sheet I gave you. 41% of our new families coming into a school district have at least one of these risk indicators. 25%. The report identifies single-parent families as a risk factor. I'm not sure that's completely fair. Just to say that a single-parent family is placing a child at risk, I don't think is correct. 25% of our families are in that condition, however. 17% of the children are in poverty, according to the guidelines they used. 33% are eligible for free and reduced lunch. You've heard us talk about those kinds of populations that we do reach out and serve. 14% are identified as coming from abused and neglected situations. That's not exactly a happy statistic. The other page, one whole page, deals with the portfolio results in writing and mathematics. different parts of the portfolio program. The bottom line is that we did reasonably well in terms of the overall scores for a district like ours, one of the urban school districts in the state. We can certainly improve and do better, and I know that our teachers and our principals would be working on that in the future. Is there anything I could try to answer specific? I am not an expert on the condition of education report. I have a copy of the report for the entire state, if anyone wants to glance through it later.
I would like to comment, just so the board knows, the superintendent is not an expert, but evidently the mayor is. I was presented a copy of a letter that the mayor wrote to the Rutland Herald tonight. The reporter showed me the letter and asked for comment, and the letter basically implies that the mayor takes great exception to what the report says in terms of accuracy, etc., and so forth. He doesn't explain it, he just questions the accuracy of it. And I did respond, as I did last night when I was inquired about the alderman's activities, that one of the problems that we seem to have, public officials need to gather their data, gather their information, get their research, and have a responsibility as leaders to represent accuracy to the public. And I think it's difficult, it was for me and perhaps for the rest of the board, to respond when the mayor writes a letter when he obviously, or at least obvious to me, having read the article in Thursday's paper, the mayor didn't read it completely or fully understand what it said, and represents himself and his assessment of that report without fully understanding. And it's another broad swipe at the school district, and I find that unfortunate. But be prepared, that's the letter that's gone to the newspaper from the mayor.
A question about the availability of programs on this supervisory union in Rutland City. Don't we participate in Success by 6?
Yes, we are, but this report reflects 1994.
And we didn't participate?
We might not have been in it completely by that time.
We started in March of 94.
March of 94?
Okay.
We didn't receive any monies in a grant form this year.
Okay.
And what about summer youth employment? Under school to work transition? We used to participate in that.
We still participate in some summer youth employment, Madeline.
I thought that pluses were next to student apprentice, maybe I'm wrong.
And student apprentice. And the student apprentice, at that time, we still had the Hurley program in place.
Okay. All right.
Not to say that that's setting the world on fire.
Might be my bifocal.
This is interesting coming from the state of Vermont. I wonder if the state also has something like the League of Cities and Towns doing a similar evaluation of the municipal government's use of funds.
I have to say, I don't think it does us any good to bash one another.
Well, that's just a question.
I think somehow we have to find a way to work together and perhaps...
Well, Madeline, one of the things that was said in the paper today was that we should be out trotting the streets trying to work with the tax reduction legislation. One of the aldermen suggested we do that. While that was going on, I was part of a committee that the mayor put together to try to figure out what we were going to do for additional tax dollars in this city, and aldermen weren't showing up for the meeting because they were lobbying up there instead of working on problems here. We all have a lot of things to do, and we all try to do our jobs very well. For a guy to get in the paper and tell me that I haven't been working hard to try and get the taxes down, my business and my families represent paying taxes on 11 properties in the city. And I care about the tax base, but I care about the kids' education too, and I only see half of that coming back to me from that.
I would also echo those remarks.
And I'm one of the taxpayers.
By saying, Madeline, that I think we've shown great restraint, and we've been very professional as a board in our dealings with the Board of Aldermen, but it's not going to last very long. I'm not going to be taking pot shots from them without responding, but I will respond professionally to whatever they say.
I can appreciate that. I just would like to maybe somehow find a way to see if we can make peace and work together, and maybe there's no way to do that.
That question was asked of me last night by the reporter, what it would take to heal, and that didn't see its way into print. And I suggested that from my perspective, mutual respect for the efforts that each body puts in the best interests of Rutland City is appropriate. I look to the Board of Aldermen to be the experts in regards to city affairs, and I have questions as a taxpayer, but as a public person, an elected member of the school board, for me to stand up and make a broad-based remark against the Board of Aldermen without having done the research, without having done the homework, sometimes knowing it's inaccurate, I think is irresponsible. We are also representatives of the taxpayer. Every March, 1/3 of us gets marched before the ballot box, and we are accountable as they are. And I would only request and suggest that if we had the mutual respect, as Alderman Casarino suggested, and if they recognize that they have every right and responsibility to ask questions, make suggestions, and do the research, we're here to work with them. But it's very difficult when they make their remarks and carry on in spite of the facts. As you know, your liaison committee met with 3 or 4 members of the Board of Aldermen. Present was Mr. Gillum, and he raised his question about the $600,000. And I think we clearly spelled out where that was coming from. And based on that session, he's either, since he makes his same comment after that, he has either refused to accept the information or isn't interested. And he's a public spokesman. And if this is going to continue, I don't know how we can represent ourselves best to the public and improve the credibility of both branches of city government in the best interests of the citizens. That's what I care about. And the healing is only going to occur when there is respect and when there is people doing their homework on both sides. I've been very disappointed in the remarks of some aldermen whom I know better and know different information, but it's not serving their political purposes, which is to appear against taxes, which everyone sitting at this table would like to see happen, taxes reduced.
I'm not sure we had it on the agenda at this time. I had my note down here to deal with it under new business, but I think it's appropriate that we talk, like Madeline says, to find some way to try and work with the aldermen and heal the wounds and not throw gas on the fire. I would like to, in some way, find a way that we sit down and try and meet. I know we have a liaison committee, but that we find some way to carry on a dialogue with the alderman and the mayor to try and resolve collaboratively the disputes that we're having and not take them out as exchanges that occur in the newspaper. I don't think it does anybody any good. It doesn't do elected officials any good, period. So I would like to suggest that perhaps we try and find perhaps a new vehicle in which the mayor participated in to try and find a way to resolve the problems, because it doesn't work this way.
I would say that's a two-way street, Bill. I think this board has shown its willingness to listen and talk with the Board of Aldermen. These are open meetings through the entire budget process. Not one member of the Board of Aldermen, to my knowledge, and I came on late, or our mayor was here until the final evening when the pot shots started happening. And it's a two-way street, and I agree with everything you said, but it takes two to tango.
Well, maybe what we ought to do is, again, initiate it ourselves and say that in our budgetary process, each time we have a draft, that we ship it over to the aldermen and we request their response and have it just on our open meeting like we do, like we used to have for officials from the town of Rutland. And if no one comes and says anything, we can indicate right on the record that they were requested to give us input and they didn't give us input. That we find some way to do it and not necessarily demand that they come over here because I'm not sure they'll do that. And I think we can set a better example for our kids by continuing to try and keep the head out.
And I think you've shown remarkable strength.
Thank you.
I appreciate that.
Where were we?
I was sort of at the end of making some remarks about the condition of education. All right, going to move on. Item 2, Superintendent's Report, Adult Basic Education Agreement. Very simply, they've approached us about the availability of a classroom to help them conduct their program for adults trying to complete their high school education. We do have a space available. We're going to make it available to that state program, and it will be in a middle school, and just another way of just collaborating with another agency. It's small, but yet it's certainly important for them. They have about 20, 25 students at a time they're working with, and we can help them out, so we're going to move ahead with that. And finally, item 3 and 4, take each one. I'd like to have the board to authorize the superintendent to apply for this local education agency grant in the amount of $79,264. That's a special education grant from the federal government.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion or questions?
Was this included as anticipated revenue in our budget process?
Was it included, anticipated, Bob?
It was.
Is this Title VI or is this something new or something
Ellen?
else?
It's IDB it's referred to. It's not Title VI. Title VI.
He has IDB is $23,850.
This is the local education
No,
agency
the
grant.
$23,850 is the preschool of IDB. It's divided into preschool and school
Elliott,
age
okay,
children.
thank you.
And this is kind of automatic that we renew our request each year. All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Thank you. Item 4.
And item
Okay.
4 regarding the IDB preschool incentive grant.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Thank you.
Yep.
Financial matters. Bob?
Thank you. 5 items on the agenda. 1 was already covered under the insurance renewal. With the fiscal year soon coming to an end, the first agenda item is the May financial statement. We do have approximately 3 days left in the fiscal year, but we'll have probably 3 or 4 months worth of audit work coming up. May was a fairly good month in terms of revenue. We received $1.7 million in revenue. Most of that was in tax transfers of $1 million. And we did receive some federal special ed monies, that flow-through money that you just approved. We received $16,000. Chapter 1, $147,000, and some vocational Perkins monies of $65,000. Some of the larger outstanding revenues at the end of May, we still had $2.2 million to be transferred in tax revenue. Most of that has been transferred as of today. I think we have about $300,000 more that they'll transfer in the next couple of days to us. $292,000 was still outstanding at the end of May for high school tuition. We have received all of that. It was due June 9th, and all the districts have paid their outstanding bills. We still have, in the middle of the page, number 3, some special ed monies that you should be receiving shortly, $20,000 of intensive reimbursement and $251,000 of extraordinary reimbursement. We have submitted preliminary final reports, and we'll be getting refunding on that probably sometime in July, so it's probably going to be set up as a receivable. Other than that, there are some small grants that money will be coming in through the month of June, and at the end of June. We'll probably still have some receivables out there, but I see our revenue coming in pretty close to what we have projected through the year. On the expense side, not much has happened since our April statement. We are in the final process of adjusting all the budgets to come up with our final projected fund balance, and I'll talk about that when we get to the contingency update, but there's no items of note I'd like to speak of on expenditures until I get into the contingency update. And I did include 2 pages, again, of monthly expenditures of the final budget as approved by the board, so you can compare it to the monthly expenditure report for May. Any questions on the financial report?
Yeah, on next year's budget, the 95-96
Sure.
budget, can you tell me where the insurance, which line item is the insurance?
Insurance would be on the second page under 5400. Page 8. 5200, excuse me. The $85,000 is the package portion. And then you'd have the workers' comp piece would be on page 7, under about the middle of the page, 2500. Workers' comp.
Oh, I'm sorry, 2,500 was the account number.
Yes.
Okay, so it's approximately $60,000. Did 60 and 85, that was the 145 that you had indicated was budgeted for. Okay.
Questions? Any other questions? Okay, contingency update. Balance on your last statement was $21,288. We did make the adjustment in May, I should say, for $115,000 for the surplus in the oil and electric account, leaving a current balance in the contingency of $136,000. There are some pending adjustments that have been on your statement for the last few months. Maintenance, bus repairs, and general maintenance supply accounts are looking at about $25,000 in the hole. This item of $18,000 I had labeled last time as graduation expenses, and basically the expenses are for all the expenses for the high school, for the added enrollments and the startup cost, and I'll talk about the graduation expenses in a minute, but that is showing about an $18,000 credit. The lunch program is still coming in at about a $30,000 deficit, and our maintenance overtime account with the comp time and the payoff we'll have next week will be about $20,000 short. The one item that was on here that was last time that's not on there this time, some good news. Athletic account, we were projecting a $10,000 deficit, and going over the final numbers, the revenue was about $10,000 short of what we projected, but the expenses were $10,000 short of what we expected to spend, so the athletic program broke even this year. So at this point, I'm projecting around a $43,000 carryover, still subject to some accounts payable and some audit adjustments, but it's a little higher than we had budgeted. Questions?
What have we done about this lunch program that we thought was cost neutral?
Well, this year, some of the extenuating circumstances were the change in the high school schedule, which really drove into our revenues and cost added expense. As part of the bid process this year that we just approved, the Marriott Corporation.
At the last meeting.
At the last meeting, yes. We bid a break-even proposition with $20,000 in-kind cost included in their budget, and a guarantee of $20,000 if they didn't break even of their management fee. So I feel very comfortable next year with the schedule. Marilyn Edwards and Marriott feel very comfortable that they will hit that target right on.
And we did address that. Okay. And what are we doing about have we sat down and talked with the athletic director about what the possibility of next year another shortfall? Or, I mean, it's not in the budget. We were lucky this year that their expenses came in $10,000 less.
Well, they came in $10,000 less because Glenn went to work very hard the second half of the school year to keep them under control because of what was happening with the revenue shortfall.
There were also, in the second half, he put out the letters to the parents explaining the cost of each program per student, and the parents came through with individual contributions that were far in excess of what he expected. They would be on pretty much a will-call basis. It's, hi, how are you? And this is what it's costing, and the parents delivered payments for the programs. Individual checks, $250, $300 a piece. Some parents.
The revenue, the earlier projection was going to be about $20,000 short, so we did pick up some revenue at the end of the year. And then Glenn did make some adjustments at the end of the year for expenditures to help the program come in and break even. And again, hopefully we'll continue that for next year. Special education audit. I've closed a memo in your packet. We just went through a special education audit sponsored by the State Department of Education. They hired a CPA firm to come in and to audit our $2.5 million special education budget. Their goal was to look at individual aids, children's IEPs, and also to see if they could find any discrepancies in our bookkeeping. In total, they found $8,464 of question cost, or cost they will not allow in special education. In the process, we also went back to our and found an additional $4,500 that we could add back in. So the net effect is about $4,000 in question cost, which will be a reduction of about $700 in our revenue. I think that's an excellent showing of a $2.5 million budget with all the paperwork we have to do for keeping track of those costs of all the tracked kids. I hope that the $700 will help them pay for the CPA firm that they hired to spend 3 days with us.
Congratulations, Bob, and both you and Ellen for a fine job of accurate tracking in that process. And you're right, I hope that $700 covers the CPA. Share it well, right?
We did cover the insurance renewal, and I have one handout here on the graduation expenses. As I said, when I had reported the $18,000 shortfall in the high school budget, I had labeled it graduation expenses and other. And basically, the graduation expenses are budgeted, but because of the shortfalls in cost by the additional students and the startup costs for textbooks and the like, when we got around to spending the graduation expenditures or purchasing them, we had already expended our budget. So that's why it showed up on my report last time. But Mrs. Nygaard at the high school and David Walk put together the cost of this year's graduation expenditures. And that for the following. Any questions?
Well, I'm glad it's a lot less than $18,000.
And for the public, the cost was $2,894 for 1995's high school graduation.
Including diplomas, which is the major portion.
Correct. Any questions?
Thank you, Bob.
That's it.
New business to come before the board. John?
I have a question about the last time, I remember we talked about it, that there was going to be a bus drive on the back side of the hedges in front of the intermediate school. What's going to happen to those beautiful trees that are in the way there? Is buzzsaw material, or can we get those moved?
Buzzsaw material.
We investigated it. We've already replaced the one that was planted by the class of 1973, and I notified that class in a formal letter of what we had to do and the fact that we did put another tree in place about 20 feet away. The last thing we have to do is take their marker and move it over. We'll do that before Jan Coleman rips into it.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Unless you want to come and take them up and take them home.
Jeez, I'm going to do that.
It is a shame. They're beautiful trees.
They're just too well developed.
Now,
I have 2 new business items. First of all, I would like to see the athletic director present at meetings when we have coaching assignments for, lengthy lists for entire seasons, so that if we have any questions, we can answer them. And the second thing I have is, Ellie said that we were working on the Title VI proposal, and and I want to know what kind of input you're getting to put that together. Is it strictly administrative, or do you have teachers or parents, anything similar to the kind of committee you had for Chapter 2?
We had a committee meet last week, and it was made up of all the administrators, representative from each level, as well as parents. We had 3 parents there, and classroom teachers. We tried to get a variety of teachers from different levels.
Thank you.
I had a question today from somebody I met about the SAT. When was the SAT given?
June.
College board SATs.
Apparently they were supposed to be at the high school and they were moved down to the junior high.
The site for the SAT has been the Rutland Junior High School all this year because the Rutland High School can't accommodate it. And students who were misdirected would have been misdirected by not reading notices. I know that the ticket said Rutland Junior High School.
Well, the reason I brought it up is that the father that was telling me about it said that they got a bill from the SAT for $15 for a site change.
I can address that. There was a problem, there was a conflict the morning of the SAT with the state track meet, which is at Burlington High School. And prior to knowing exactly when the events were going to take place, Coach Norman, Coach McCollum gave Jim Holleneck, our guidance director, a list of the kids who were going to have that conflict. He went ahead and requested that the kids be able to, first of all, they're going to have them take it at Burlington High School, and they found out that the event started too early, so Jim agreed to provide a special administration at the high school the Monday following the SATs, and went from 2 to 5 o'clock that Monday afternoon. However, the SAT, being the monopoly that they are, would not refund the money, and so the parents were stuck with that bill.
And that was just for the kids that were in the track meet, or was this for everybody?
Yeah.
The kids in the track meet. Okay. Okay, thank you.
Other new business? Old business to come before the board.
I want to know if someone responded to the letter from the Dailies.
Yes, I did.
Thank you.
Other old business?
Contacted them personally, too.
Other old business? Policy, Cheryl?
The policy committee met last week to go over the harassment policy. This policy was formerly the sexual harassment policy, but because of new legislation, it needed to be updated to include all types of harassment. So what you have in front of you is the recommendation from the policy committee, which also includes the location of this policy in 2 places in our policy manual. The reason for that is that this is a policy that deals with both personnel behavior as well as student behavior. So the feeling of the committee was to locate it in both sections so that it would be easily found. So this is the recommendation from the policy committee, and I would move that it be accepted for its first reading.
Any discussion?
Actually, specifically, just help, the real differences are outlined on page, I think, page 2.
Yeah.
The racial and color, religious, national origin, marital status, disability, sexual orientation. Those are the pieces that the state legislation required being added to the definition of harassment.
Any discussion? If not, all in favor of the motion of the first reading, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Thank you. And that will be on the agenda for a second reading at our next regular board meeting.
That's it?
Okay. Is there any further business to come before the board in open session?
Under policy, it says here B, prescription medication, see memo. So is there a memo?
Yeah, I have one.
Yeah, the memo is on, is in the packet.
Really just an information memo.
Yeah.
It was the one that we sent out to the
I
committee.
see, okay. I thought that was the one there.
Oh, okay.
For public information, The next regular meeting of the board is scheduled for the 4th Tuesday in July, which is July 25th at 7 o'clock here at Longfellow. There will be no meeting scheduled on the 11th unless an urgency requires the meeting to be called. So the 4th Tuesday in July, July 25th. At this time, the chair... Sorry?
Does that create any kind of a problem in terms of hiring schedule for that homeschool coordinator position or the nurses to have them on board for the beginning of the year?
I don't think so. I think we have some other things we want to discuss around those positions, and I think the timing is still appropriate to accomplish the goal if we so decide to move ahead.
And if that were to change, we would back to the board. The chair would entertain a motion that following the room being cleared, the board go into executive session for the purposes of discussing contractual and personnel items, the premature release of conversations or information regarding these issues would place the board at a disadvantage in the opinion of the chair.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We're in recess. The room is clear.